All right, let's jump right into this. Welcome to today's explainer, where we take complex source material, break it all down, and get you straight to the facts. Today, we're looking at a totally fascinating, highly charged debate that is happening right at the heart of French democracy. We are unpacking a high-stakes parliamentary commission that's investigating the neutrality of France's massive public broadcasting system. We're talking about a network that costs taxpayers roughly 4 billion euros a year. And the burning question they're trying to answer is it actually politically neutral?
To really wrap our heads around this, we're anchoring our explainer in one specific official document from the French National Assembly, dated March 26, 2026. What you have going on in this hearing is lawmakers actively interrogating 3 different media watchdogs. They're basically trying to figure out an almost impossible task. How do you actually accurately measure political bias in the media? So here is our roadmap for today. 1. The public broadcasting inquiry. 2. Artificial intelligence in question. 3. The structural approach to media. 4. The outsourcing challenge. And 5. Redefining pluralism. Let's get right to it.
Section 1. The public broadcasting inquiry. The fundamental question facing this commission is honestly as old as public media itself. How do we define, and more importantly, guarantee pluralism in taxpayer-funded television and radio? The law absolutely requires a diversity of voices. But to measure if that's actually happening, we're presented with 2 radically opposing worldviews here. On one side, the conservative-leaning Institut Thomas More says we should just let artificial intelligence ruthlessly crunch the data. But on the other side, the left-leaning observatory, Acrimid, says no, ignore the AI completely and look at the deep underlying economic structures of the industry. Moving on to Section 2, artificial intelligence in question. Let's start by looking at that data-driven approach. The Institut Thomas More argued before the commission that human analysts are just inherently flawed by their own political emotions. Their solution to this? An AI that analyzed a staggering 2,000 hours of programming. We are talking over 7,000 individual broadcasts and chronicles across 7 public channels, all captured in just a 3-month window. The goal was to mathematically prove a structural bias. It's just a massive net cast over the entire network. And the findings are super interesting. The algorithm was programmed to assign a hostility score based on the lexical field, tone, and editorial angle used whenever different political families were mentioned. According to this data, politicians on both the radical left and the radical right face systemic hostility, both scoring in the negatives, at -2.39 and -2.88 respectively. Meanwhile, centrist figures and the presidential majority receive notably better, much more positive treatment across the board. But they took it even further than just how guests are treated. The Institut Thomas More actually asked the AI to rate the overall ideological orientation of the public broadcaster on a scale from -100, representing the extreme left, to +100, being the extreme right. And the AI assigned an overall score of -10. For Thomas More, this mathematical skew proves a structural center-left bias across public broadcasting. They call it a facade of pluralism. Basically, you might see different faces on TV, but the editorial lens remains firmly tilted to the left. Which leads us to their final point. Is the media totally out of touch? By comparing public opinion polls with the topics that get covered the most by public media, Thomas More claims the broadcasting agenda is completely disconnected. While everyday voters are out there prioritizing issues like health, purchasing power, and security, the public media overwhelmingly focuses its lens on ecology and multiculturalism. They argue this lines up much more closely with centrist and Green Party sympathizers than it does with the general public. All right, Section 3, the structural approach to media. So, Acrimid, which is the left-leaning media observatory, took the floor at the hearing and basically completely flipped the script. They argued that using an AI to just count guests or measure tone completely misses the real problem. Instead, they point to a systemic economic pressure cooker. They're talking about the relentless pressure of audience ratings, the deep dependence on advertising revenue, the heavy concentration of capitalist corporate ownership, and the super fast-paced, imposed formats of modern television. They argue that these forces are what actually cripple the media's ability to fulfill its democratic function. This quote right here from Acrimed's president, Matthias Raymond, perfectly crystallizes their whole philosophy. He told lawmakers that critiquing individual journalists or overanalyzing specific broadcasts for left or right bias is just incomplete. It's completely blind to the structural causes. In their view, if all major media outlets end up sounding exactly the same, it's because the people running them come from the same social classes, attend the exact same schools, and operate under the exact same economic pressures. To back this claim up, they presented their own historical data to the commission. Between 2008 and 2012, which was right through the global financial crisis, a whopping 72% of economists invited onto public television were liberal, pro-market experts. Only 15% were heterodox economists who actually challenged the capitalist consensus. For Acromed, this is ideological homogeneity in action. It's a kind of structural bias, they argue, and AI could never, ever capture.
Which brings us to Section 4, the outsourcing challenge.
This part of the hearing focused on a highly debated, very tangible structural problem: outsourcing. The commission noted a massive financial footprint here. A single private production company, MediaOne, receives over 110 million euros in annual contracts from the public broadcaster. And another company, Bunny J, receives over 86 million. Guys, that is a mountain of public taxpayer money flowing directly into private hands just to create content for public channels. And the reason this matters so much is the loss of direct editorial oversight. Acromed argues that farming out flagship debate and political shows, programs like Helle Buck or C'est Politique, means the public broadcaster is literally handing its editorial control over to private companies. We even had journalists working for the public channel admit they have absolutely no say over the format or the guest list of these privately produced shows. This sparked some pretty loud calls at the hearing to re-internalize production, to actually protect the network's neutrality and independence.
And finally, Section 5, redefining pluralism.
Now, the lawmakers didn't just sit back and take notes. They actively pushed back on both sides. First, they took aim at the Institut Thomas More's AI. They asked a really great question. Can an algorithm truly grasp the nuance of human irony? And they had the perfect example. Apparently, one public radio station was legally hitting its required quota for right-wing politicians by rebroadcasting their interviews at 3 a.m. The AI caught the data, sure, but it completely missed the sneaky, manipulative context of the timing. You really can't help but laugh at a highly advanced algorithm getting totally tricked by a late-night graveyard shift. But hey, the lawmakers certainly didn't let Acromed off the hook either. The rapporteur challenged Acromed's president by pointing out the organization's own explicit historical alliances with left-wing labor unions and anti-globalization movements. The question they posed was sharp and, honestly, pretty necessary. Does being anchored so firmly in the political left blind your organization to the very real left-wing biases present in modern newsrooms? So, where does this leave us? It leaves the French media regulator with an ultimate dilemma. If humans are too blinded by their own politics and AI is too easily tricked by context and late-night loopholes, how do you actually measure and enforce neutrality in a hyper-polarized world? Do you count the minutes, or do you judge the mindset? It's a massive challenge for democracy, and it's one that should definitely make all of us rethink how we consume our own media. Thanks so much for joining this explainer, and remember, keep questioning what you watch.